Dotted across the planet are the largest living beings on Earth, creatures whose size is difficult for the human mind to even comprehend. We are already accustomed to seeing their images on cinema screens and in well-known documentary films. We are speaking of blue whales, marine giants whose length is comparable to 3 buses lined up end to end, stretching across the boundless expanses of the ocean. Indeed, these are astonishing beings, true wonders of nature. But there is one question that is raised extremely rarely. When such a colossal creature, with all its mass and complex bodily structure, becomes food, how exactly is it processed by humans? How does a living being so immense that the human eye struggles to take it in as a whole turn into dishes, moreover into works of culinary art? Today, we will embark on a deep journey to explore a unique and ancient field. Japan's traditional whaling industry. Drawing on the materials used and historical evidence, we will examine how these remarkable masters transform creatures of seemingly limitless size into refined food products, creations that are, at the same time, both art and craft. This is a story about a profound tradition, about a craft that has been honed and perfected over more than 400 years of history, passed down from generation to generation. For the communities mentioned in these materials, whale meat is not merely a food product or a source of protein. It represents an inseparable part of their cultural heritage, a symbol of their identity and traditions. At the same time, it is an extremely important economic resource, providing livelihoods for thousands of families, thousands of craftsmen, and coastal communities. "400 years is an astonishingly long span of time. Throughout this entire period, the craft evolved, adapted, and continued to exist, creating products that we are about to explore. The whaling industry was modernized around the 1880s with the introduction of new technologies and advanced methods. However, its roots extend much deeper. It did not begin in the 19th century, at a time when people lacked modern equipment and relied solely on knowledge accumulated over centuries. The sizes of these whale species vary significantly. Some of them weigh only about 1,035 kilograms, and even this figure already exceeds the limits of ordinary human imagination. But there are other species, true giants, whose mass reaches 190 tons. The number 190 tons is truly astonishing. It nearly lies beyond human comprehension and logical understanding. "190 tons is equivalent to the combined weight of approximately 30 adult elephants. Imagine 30 elephants, the largest land animals, gathered into a single mass. That is the weight of one single blue whale. This industry demands an exceptional level of skill, a deep understanding of the anatomy of these creatures, the structure of their bodies, as well as knowledge of which parts are valuable and which are not. The materials also describe the life cycle of these beings, truly an astonishing journey. Whales prefer to live in the cold waters of both hemispheres, where food resources are abundant and environmental conditions are harsh. However, from these cold seas, they migrate thousands of miles, returning to warm waters closer to the equator in order to reproduce. It is a grand voyage, a life cycle that repeats year after year, over centuries and millions of years. What happens to these whales after they are harvested? They are towed to shore and delivered to a processing plant. However, the point that is emphasized again and again throughout all these materials is that the entire process must be carried out with the utmost care. Because when working with a creature weighing 190 tons, a single wrong cut, one small mistake in butchering technique can spoil tons of meat, tons of the most valuable meat. It can turn prime cuts worth thousands of dollars into meat of significantly lower quality, or even render it completely unusable. That amount of money is by no means small. For communities that depend on this industry, one incorrect knife cut can have economic consequences for dozens or even hundreds of families. The first stage of this process, of course, is the thorough washing of the entire whale with water. This is a simple beginning, which at first glance may seem insignificant compared to what will follow, yet it is precisely this step that reflects something far deeper: respect for the raw material they are working with. Everything must be clean from start to finish. No carelessness is permissible. This is the first principle. Next comes the stage of removing the fins and the tail. What is most striking at this stage is that all of these cuts are made with a knife, only a knife. The level of skill required to do this precisely, to cut in exactly the right places without deviation, is truly impressive. And this is where the core essence of the entire process lies. This is not ordinary butchering, like slicing meat in a kitchen. It is far closer to the work of a sculptor, carefully carving every detail of a work of art. These are anatomical skills accumulated over many generations, passed down from father to son, from master to apprentice, across hundreds of years of history. We then move on to the third stage. The removal of the skin. The materials describe how workers make long cuts along the whale's body and strip away the thick layer of skin from its massive form. When one tries to imagine this scene, it resembles the removal of the outer plating from a gigantic ship, far more than the skinning of an animal. Once the skin has been completely removed, the process enters a stage where the most refined techniques are applied to separate enormous masses of meat from the whale's skeletal framework. At the same time, the internal organs are extracted with special care. This entire operation requires the coordinated work of a full team. No single person is capable of carrying it out alone. It is a form of collective mastery. The careful removal of the internal organs is also of critical importance throughout this process. It is not merely a secondary step within a larger operation. It has a profound impact on the final result. Proper extraction of the organs not only prevents the spread of bacteria throughout the mass of meat, a hidden danger well known to anyone who works with food products, but also ensures that the meat is preserved in the freshest possible condition. Any delay, any mistake at this stage, no matter how minor it may seem, can directly affect the final quality of the product. Finally, after all the meat has been fully separated, the gigantic head is removed separately. Vast masses of meat and skin blocks that even several dozen people are unable to lift are cut into smaller, more manageable sections. These pieces are divided in such a way that they can be more easily stored and transported to the next stages of the production chain. Every part has its own value and its own purpose. And from these blocks of raw material, processed with such care and precision, we enter a completely different world, the world of cuisine, where these products are transformed into dishes that people take pleasure in enjoying. One of the dishes most frequently mentioned in the materials is sashimi, thin slices of fresh whale meat, eaten raw, without any heat treatment. To prepare sashimi, a specific cut of meat known as onomi is used. Onomi is a section of meat from the whale's back, closer to the tail. This area is especially highly valued and is considered one of the most precious cuts. The reason lies in the ideal balance it achieves between lean meat and fine veins of fat running through the fibers. It can be compared to the belly portion of bluefin tuna otoro, the very cut that sushi connoisseurs are well aware of, exceptionally prized and highly valued. The texture of these slices is described as gently melting in the mouth, a sensation always anticipated by those who enjoy sashimi. The flavor, however, is richer than that of tuna. It possesses a depth and fatty richness that tuna lacks. Naturally, it is eaten with traditional accompaniments, sharp wasabi and salty soy sauce, creating a perfect balance of flavors. Another dish that also uses onomi meat is tataki. Instead of being eaten completely raw, the meat is very quickly and lightly seared over charcoal or treated with a blowtorch, so that it becomes only barely cooked. One need only imagine the aroma of the outer surface sizzling under the flame, with wisps of steam rising and carrying a light, slightly sharp, smoky scent. This highlights one important point. Whale meat is treated with the same respect as other high-grade types of red meat around the world. It is neither cheap nor ordinary meat. It is a valuable raw ingredient, deserving of reverent handling. From refined slices of sashimi eaten raw to lightly seared, aromatic tataki, from fried steaks and crispy katsu to rich, salted and smoked cuts of meat. Each method of preparation is a way to fully reveal the potential of every part of the meat. This reflects a highly developed culinary culture and, in its own way, a sustainable approach without waste. With complete utilization of all raw materials. Moving on to dishes that undergo heat treatment, the materials mention beef, steak, and katsu names given to dishes made from breaded, fried meat. For their preparation, another cut is used, known as akaminoko. Akaminoko is described in the materials as meat with a rich flavor similar to high-quality beef. When prepared as a grilled steak, it truly becomes a refined gastronomic experience. For katsu, the meat is coated in panko breadcrumbs and fried until a crispy crust forms, creating a distinctly crunchy exterior. Finally, there is a more traditional method, salting and smoking the meat. Typically, meat from the lower jaw and the belly area is used for these sections that contain a high amount of fat. This process produces a very rich, distinctive umami flavor. So, to summarize, what does whale meat taste like? Most materials describe it as similar to beef, but more tender and with a characteristic richness of fat. Naturally, the flavor also varies depending on which specific part of the meat is used. The comparison with beef provides a reference point, a way to understand it through something already familiar to us. Yet it is precisely this greater tenderness and pronounced richness that create the true distinction. It carries a unique taste of the ocean, something no land-based meat can provide. This is a flavor that can only develop in a creature living in salt water, feeding on marine organisms, and existing within its migratory life cycle. From a nutritional standpoint, the materials emphasize that it is a rich source of protein. It contains little saturated fat and is especially high in omega-3 fatty acids, nutrients that are extremely beneficial for the cardiovascular system and the brain. Yes, these are exactly the advantages mentioned throughout all materials devoted to whale meat. However, in order to form a comprehensive perspective, the materials also point to one potential risk. Because whales occupy a high position in the oceanic food chain, they can accumulate toxins from the environment, such as heavy metals. In this regard, the sources note that the consumption of whale meat may lead to the accumulation of these substances in the human body. It is important to recognize both aspects of the issue presented in these materials, both the nutritional benefits and the potential risks. Thus, we have undertaken a fairly detailed journey from the 400-year history of this industry, through processing methods that require the highest level of skill, to the richness of dishes and the diversity of preparation techniques. An entirely distinctive culinary world has been revealed to us. What these materials depict is a complex and profound relationship between Japanese culture and whales. This is not merely a story about a dish or a type of food. It is a narrative about heritage, craftsmanship, and the identity of an entire community passed down over centuries. It is a living legacy, a tradition that continues to be practiced to this day. This leads us to reflect on a broader question. These materials have shown us the depth of a long-standing culinary tradition, with its unique techniques and its own gastronomic culture. But then, how can such a tradition with its methods, Its distinctive cultural and culinary values exist and adapt in a world where awareness of ecology and the conservation of marine life is steadily growing. This is a question for which there is no single answer, and it requires a deep dialogue between tradition and conservation, between culture and environmental responsibility.